Okay, fine. We'll watch the tuna video. The tune video. Maybe we'll go to the Philly one after that. I also have an Alan Pan video. Giving chickens their tails back. We might check that one out as well. Anyway, can you tune a fish?
For the last few months, I've had a pun stuck in my head, and it's one you've probably heard a million times. You can tune a piano, but you can't tune a fish. I love this joke, not just because it's a god-tier pun, but because if we remove the pun, swapping tuna out for tuna, instantly, images of fishermen, musicians that create fish xylophones, sing sushi sonatas, and even harmonize with halibut come to mind. But most of all, I wonder, why can't we tune a fish? It's not—
I did see a video of Weird Al Yankovic with a synthesizer powered by bananas. You like the bananas are different keys.
not like there's a lot of research intending to look into disproving puns about the musical properties of fish. So if I wanted to answer this question, I was gonna have to investigate it myself. For the most part, when we think of a tuning system, we think of the 12 notes of the chromatic scale, from A to G sharp. Commonly, this A here is defined as 440
I know music
hertz.
for sure.
Every note above this A is determined by multiplying each note by the 12th root of 12 over and over and over again. And every note below is determined by dividing by that same factor until you have a full set of notes. This is called 12 tet, or 12 tone equal temperament. Yes, there is an 8 tet, 31 tet, 13 tet, any tet you could possibly want. And if you want to hear music that uses alternative tuning systems, I'd recommend Sevish as a great starting point for getting into microtonal music. I'm going to consider something in tune if the notes it produces during normal operation are a subset of those notes. Chromatic instruments like piano, guitar, or a violin can play an unbroken series of these notes without any jumps. But other instruments like diatonic harmonicas or kalimbas may have spacings between the notes to restrict you to a particular key or scale.
Right.
Tuning an instrument will then be to adjust the active mechanism of the instrument until it produces notes from 12-tone equal temperament. For stringed instruments, this is going to involve increasing or decreasing the tension of strings until they match a reference or until a tuner reports that it's in pitch. You could not possibly put a fish under enough tension to produce an audible pitch without it—
Well, there's only one way to find out.
absolutely just ripping apart. At most,
Music scales are a convention. You can do whatever the fuck you want. Yeah, I know you can definitely do some, like, weird fucking tuning.
you can make some wet slapping noises, which may function as useful percussion to somebody, but not us. So how do we get notes out of fish? The answer lies in its flesh. Flesh is full of water and ions normally used for muscle contraction. And this means you can attach a power supply and current will flow through it. If you then probe different points on the fish with a multimeter, you can measure different voltages. Small safety warning here, but I want to be very clear that the voltages I'm using in this video are very small, in the range of 3.3 to 5 volts DC. But if we take a step back and look at what we've created, we can see that this is basically just a flesh potentiometer. Instead of turning a dial to get a different voltage at the output, we can adjust the position of a probe to get a different voltage. And if you connect a probe to a microcontroller with analog inputs, you'd be able to read those voltages and convert them into pitches and play them over a speaker. My first attempt at this concept worked like this. If the probe reads 0 volts, play the frequency of the lowest pitch we want to be able to play. I chose 440 hertz, which is A4. If the probe reads 5 volts, play the frequency of the highest pitch we want to play. I chose 880 hertz, which is A5. If the probe reads any other value between the two values, interpolate to determine the pitch that should be played. Now this seems like it should work, but there's one big issue. It's basically impossible to get the probe near 0 volts or 5 volts unless you're literally touching the metal of the power supply leads. We'd expect to be reasonably close to 0 volts or 5 volts at each end, but it's actually closer to 2.2 volts and 4.7 volts.
Well, go with those numbers then. That'll work, surely.
Attaching 2 more probes to the fish, we can set the lower and upper voltage limits for the interpolation.
The only reason equal temperament is predominant is because every 12 steps, the tone doubles itself, and it sounds so harmonic with the tone 12 steps below that it sounds like the same note in a higher pitch. I see.
Equation. And these are voltages the probes can actually read. So with all that in mind, will this setup work with a real fish?
All right, well, let's
I'm going to assume, no, that's why the video is only 3 minutes in.
get my desk dirty, so that's why we're putting down some parchment paper. So here's our main man.
We have, right now what we have is, Yuo's lab if he didn't live in a crack house.
So I did mention the 3 probes earlier. We got probe, we've got the low-end probe and the high-end probe, but we do actually need to add 2 more probes. We need to add 1 for ground and 1 for power, so we can actually power up this fish. What I think makes sense here is that blue should be 5 volts and yellow should be ground.
Ah, sure, yeah.
So it looks like we're getting about 2.89 volts up here. We're getting around 1.17 volts down here.
As expected, the main issue is finding the pitches you want to actually play. Since I don't have perfect pitch, this process involves searching around the fish with the probe and marking the location of any pitches I was interested in keeping track of to play later. But after marking down a few notes, we can actually start to play music.
Technically music.
That ugly screeching between each note is due to the fact that analog inputs will sort of just pick up random fluctuating voltages from the environment when not connected to anything. You can add a filter capacitor across the analog input to help prevent this, but probably due to sleep deprivation, I neglected to add this. For the same reason, when I first built a prototype of this circuit, I had decided to test it out on a line of mustard instead of fish for some reason.
Why? Why would you do that?
But I'm not satisfied
This is
with
fucking
Trying to
cursed.
find each note is a pain in the ass. The screeching between each note is pretty unacceptable if this were ever to be played by a real musician. And also, we're entirely restricted to playing a single note at a time instead of being able to do cool things like chords. When I first had the idea for this project, I was imagining something way more akin to a piano. And pressing each key would trigger the Arduino to play the pitch associated with the probe for that note. If we want to make that work, we're going to need some more probes. The Arduino we're using doesn't have enough analog inputs to read from this many probes, so we're going to incorporate an analog multiplexer into our design. When you apply voltages to these pins, one of the many channels become available on the signal pin. If you quickly cycle through all the channels, it's as if you have 16 extra analog inputs, but we'll only need 12, 1 for each key. But wait, wouldn't we need 14 probes now if it's 12 keys plus calibration probes? And you're right, except that I decided to make some changes to the way the software worked. The software will calculate the pitches assigned to each probe the same way as before, except that we're going to make the first probe always play a perfect C, and the last note will always play perfect B. But the voltage read on each of these notes will also determine how the voltages on the other probes are interpolated. With the probe inputs out of the way, let's talk about the actual note input mechanism, the keyboard. I won't lie, I had already started designing.
Do you know what I want to hear on the fish? That apple also works. We got to do sea shanty. Sea shanty's very important.
And building a custom keyboard for this purpose, with mechanical switches arranged like a piano, a built-in LCD, and a speaker. But due to my lack of experience using assemblies and CAD software, issues with my laser cutter, and dreading the amount of soldering I need to wire up all the buttons and all the probes, we're going to try something a bit more convenient, if not a little bit jankier. A PS2 keyboard.
Hey!
No, not that kind of PS2, this kind of PS2. The PS2 keyboard protocol is extremely simple compared to USB, only requiring 2 digital pins on the Arduino, so we don't need any special shields, and there's already a library out there that handles all the communication to get scan codes from the keyboard. However, for me to be satisfied and make it a bit easier to play, I'm going to need this keyboard to look a bit more like a piano.
God, what are we doing here?
Much better. I won't say it's the prettiest, but at least we can see exactly where notes are now. Now in my head, this all seemed like it was pretty straightforward. Read the key presses from the keyboard, map them to pitches based on the probes, play those over the speaker, and bam, fish piano. But here's the laundry list of issues that I ran into getting this setup to work. Number 1, the library I'm using to
For anyone into making music, there's a pretty fun program called Famicom Studio. It's not Reaper, but it's a fun gimmick to mess around with. Famicom/NES sound fonts. Ooh! Do you know it's also a fun music thing? Dalai Lama. It comes back around every couple of months. How long's when? You know what? When did Delay Llama release? I don't even know. (2002).
Handle PS2 keyboard inputs has a pinout reference for building your own breakout board. So I went ahead and created my own on a piece of proto board. Unfortunately, after plugging in the keyboard, none of the lights turned on, and no keystrokes registered with the Arduino. Turns out the author of the reference had flipped all the pinouts, so the real version is actually this. In a fit of rage, I cut the end off the cable and manually wired it up. Next is a bug I don't understand at all. If I powered on the keyboard from an external power supply, mashing a button for a few seconds would randomly start spitting out scan codes that didn't match the key being pressed. Fix for this was just to power the keyboard directly from the Arduino, but I'm not 100% sure what was causing this. Even with that fixed, the library I'm using is doing something weird, or my code is doing something weird, because sometimes it seems like the keys stick and won't turn off again until you find the key and push it again. The audio would also cut out randomly and glitch out when I held down keys, which sounds really terrible. To solve this issue, and hopefully also the issue with sticking keys, I decided to add another Arduino to the mix, which will be entirely responsible for handling pitch synthesis on 4 different channels, called voices. The main Arduino will just send commands to the second Arduino. The first command starts synthesis for a certain frequency on a voice, and the second command stops synthesis for a voice. This did make playback way smoother, but it didn't fix the key sticking issue at all. If all those reasons weren't enough to justify abandoning the PS2 keyboard, there's something that absolutely pile drives the usefulness of this keyboard straight to the depths of Tartarus. Key jamming. Now my low-end knockoff mechanical keyboard is able to register several keys all pressed at the same time. I can even mash down the entire keyboard without losing a single key press. But when I press these keys, this key won't register at all. So with all these problems, I think we need to eat the PS2 keyboard and move on to something a little less fun, but much more reasonable. An actual MIDI keyboard. And this should solve a lot of the issues we're having. I made sure to choose an Arduino that had the ability to act as a MIDI device over USB, so that with the keyboard connected to my PC, I can open my DAW of choice, add a hardware instrument, and set up the Arduino Micro as an output. When you press keys on the keyboard, MIDI messages are sent from the keyboard to the PC, Big Studio sends them to the Arduino Micro, and when the Arduino receives a note on event, it grabs a reading from the probe associated with that note and sends a command to the second Arduino to start playing that note. Now obviously, a full piano has more than 12 notes, so to fill out the other octaves, I'm just multiplying or dividing the values of the notes in the octave by powers of 2. That seems to have solved all the issues I encountered during the build, but we won't really know until we give it some real tests. First up is a cucumber, which has the main benefit of not stinking up my room and also doesn't require gloves to work with.
That's fair.
I 3D printed this bracket to help evenly space out the probes for this first attempt. Here's how C major sounds.
It certainly sounds.
The bottom half sounds about right, but the upper part gets pretty funky. Also, some of the keys that should actually be ascending, descend. But let's not spend too much time on a cucumber. Let's see how this goes.
Oh my god.
And I should quickly mention I'm actually doing the tuning here. Most of the process is simply finding a probe that's a little too far from the correct pitch, and then moving it around until I find a location for it that has the correct pitch. It's pretty tedious, but funnily enough, it's actually probably faster to tune these probes than a normal guitar, and definitely a piano. After spending a couple minutes tuning,
I wonder if it changes over the life of the fish, right? Like if you left the fish out, I assume the water content's going to change, and that's going to change the conductivity of the fish.
That we can actually start to get some music out of.
Okay.
Last and not least, the rainbow trap. It's been about a week since I last tested with it, and I didn't want it to go horribly bad, so I froze it. Thankfully, we can give it a few minutes in a pot of hot water to get it back into a tunable state. So let's play some actual music on this fish.
So that's probably going to be wrong, but let's at least listen to what it sounds like.
Okay.
I don't have the motor skill to play any pieces on the piano itself, but designed this circuit with that in mind. Instead of sending messages that come from the keyboard, we can just load up any MIDI songs and send them to the Arduino Micro.
Do you want to know what's terrible? What's fucking terrible about this? It actually kind of works for like a retro style indie game. Like it kind of sounds like a sound font you'd have on an old console. Like, obviously, that's going to happen with MIDI naturally. But, like, it actually kind of works. And I don't want someone to make a game music with a fish. Better question now. What is the optimal fish to play music with? Hi, we're listening to the trout being tuned. Yeah. Do you know? I kind of wish you bought like a whole like a giant big tuna. Yep. The one time that is valid.
Let's wrap things up there.
So, what are the main takeaways here?
You can tune a
1.
fish.
Now you know that flesh is conductive. Do with that knowledge what you will. And 2. Tuning a fish is definitely possible, but it comes with a lot of drawbacks. Every fish has a different composition, which is going to affect probe placement. And over time, as the fish warms up and dries out, the notes will gradually shift in pitch.
Okay.
Do I recommend you try this? Probably not. But I'm really happy I got around to making this video. I've been wanting to make this since the beginning of my YouTube channel, and after I had to delay the project I was initially planning to turn into a video this month, I'm glad I had a backup project that let me explore more circuit building techniques. But with that said, if you want to see more content where I investigate questions that don't need answers, feel free to subscribe and share the video with anybody else you think would be interested.
Sure. Okay. Right. That was fun, Shadow. That was a fun video. Fish.